Welcome to the Ed Leaders Edge podcast, where we interview innovators and thought leaders in the field of education who are helping students thrive. I'm your host, Ed Madison. I'm a professor and researcher at the University of Oregon, an educational consultant, and serve as executive director of the Journalistic Learning Initiative, a nonprofit organization that empowers elementary, middle, and high school students to discover their voice, improve academic outcomes, and become self-directed learners through project-based storytelling. Welcome to our program. Okay, Yusuf Ahmad is the co-founder of Playlab, a nonprofit company that empowers educators, schools, and impact organizations to create AI tools tailored for their unique needs. They can start from scratch or adapt tools from Playlab's global community. Playlab is basically a safe sandbox that allows educators to experiment with AI responsibly. Yousef is also a research affiliate at MIT's Media Lab, where he completed his master's. Welcome to the podcast, Yousef. And it's
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's very befitting that you're kind of our inaugural guest on this new podcast series, because our Journalistic Learning Initiative nonprofit greatly benefits from partnering with Playlab, based on I guess I'd call it a chance meeting that we had back in October. I looked at my calendar; it was back in October in San Francisco, where I just kind of stumbled up and talked to you and learned about your work. Give people a sense of kind of what Playlab's mission is and what you do.
Sure. So I used to be part of the Scratch team at MIT. And if you don't know, Scratch is a block-based programming language that empowers kids and educators around the world. Over 100 million have already used it to bring their ideas to life using software. My co-founder, Ian, he's been building AI products for years. His last company was funded by Google and acquired a year and a half ago. And so when the ChatGPT revolution started and we saw these new generative AI models, we were both struck by the power and the leaps in capability, but also struck that most educators that we knew weren't really jumping in. They weren't tinkering with the technology, and they definitely weren't harnessing their expertise in connection with the technology to bring their ideas to life. And we wondered, if you can make that easier to do, what might people create? And so our mission is really democratizing who gets to shape how AI is adopted in our society as AI becomes much more ubiquitous. And we want that to happen in a way that's democratic. And what that means to us, it needs to be accessible to anyone. Folks need to be enabled to create with it and adapt to it. And they need to be able to do so responsibly on top of AI models that are transparent and that have been audited for bias. And so that's our vision. We're trying to democratize how AI is adopted in education in a way that's responsible. And your work embodies that.
Yeah.
You're an expert journalist. You're an incredible educator. And you've been able to bring your ideas to life. And you might not share it, but the tools that just even one of your tools, your journalistic writing coach, has been used by over 15,000 educators and students across the United States with zero marketing, because It's a tool that's incredible. It solves a real problem. It's why professors at HBCUs like Howard, why teachers in rural Southwest Missouri are using that thing to transform how they teach and how their kids learn.
Yeah, you're speaking about Murrow, which we named after the famous journalist Edward R. Murrow, and very appropriate given the times that we're in right now politically. But and thank you. Yes, yeah. I mean, I walked up to you and you were telling me about how I think some English teachers, I think in one of the charter networks, were using it to teach 5-paragraph essay writing. And I said, well, what about journalism? And you were like, yeah, you can do that. And within a month, we had a tool and we're presenting it at conferences, and it's just been, full steam ahead ever since then. I want to address couple things that you mentioned. So one is this anxiety that for a lot of people in the education space that are concerned that this is all moving so fast and we don't really understand it yet. I mean, there's certainly now we're sensing misgivings about unfettered access to social media years after it was promised to be this sort of utopia, and they're reticent about AI as well. How do you address that concern?
Yeah, really good question. I think that we as a society are at a crossroads right now. There's a path where we repeat the mistakes of the social media era, where we see consolidation. We see one or two winners that control the technology we use every day. And most people are dependent and users of that technology. That's one path. And I think that's a path that we are currently on right now. There's another path that's much more democratic, where the technology is not controlled by a few players. It's open source, it's transparent, and most people, educators, young people, feel like they can bend the technology to meet their needs.
Mm. So the other thing you mentioned was bias, and there's there's concern about where is this
Mhm.
information coming from,
Mhm.
that in these large language models, and so how do we address that issue?
It's opaque. We don't know. Like that's the simple answer. Like whether you're using OpenAI's models, Anthropic's, Google's, they're opaque, and that's a big risk. And so one of the things we're seeing right now, so related to the whole consolidation and decentralization tension, there's also degrees of what we call openness. Most models right now are what we would call opaque. We don't know what data it's trained on. We don't know how the models work, and they're controlled. You can only access them via an API. The more open a model is, the more access you have to it. So the most open models that are powerful, Mistral, Llama 3, you can download it on your computer, you can use it, you can host it yourself. But even with those models, we don't know what data it's trained on. And so one of the things that we care a lot about is how might we build large public data sets in partnership with education systems around the world to create diverse data that we can then use to train open source AI models, and not us, right? A whole community of researchers and others around the world that again is transparent. It's been audited by researchers for bias, for what they call interpretability, understanding how these models work. And eventually, if it's open source, you can download it on even the most low cost Android devices. So you're not paying a fee every time you use it.
Yeah. So how close are we to that vision?
I have a version of Llama 3, which is Meta's latest model, on my laptop running right now. So I use that for different queries, and it's decent. That's today. If we look at the capability leaps and the way the space is advancing, my thesis is that in the next year, we'll have at least a GPT 3.5 class model that it's on our roadmap. So we're working to like have that downloadable on low cost Android devices. And again, if more folks in the space contribute within the next year, maybe at the most next 2 to 5 years, we'll see GPT-4, and even more powerful models that can be downloaded and accessed offline in a way that's truly private and secure, and in a way that's built on data that's transparent.
Mhm. Let's address, I think, one of the primary concerns that in
Mm-hmm.
the education community has to do
Mm-hmm.
with cheating. So, students basically going to Chat GPT and saying, "Write me an essay," and so therefore thwarting their own critical thinking and ability to write themselves. I mean, um, how do you speak to that? I mean, I think one of the reasons that our Muro tool has been so widely adopted is because it doesn't give answers. It basically coaches young people to use it, critically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that technology alone is not going to answer that question. So, for example, Muro, in the hands of an educator or a student who is motivated to improve their writing, is a really powerful tool. It's going to change teaching. It's going to change learning. Muro in the hand of a kid who's not motivated and is not in a context that's supporting them or motivating them is likely not going to be as transformative. I just want to underscore that.
Let's step away from our conversation for a moment for me to tell you about the Journalistic Learning Initiative's innovative educational tools and services. If you're looking to make the best decision for your teaching staff and students about AI adoption, improving student engagement, strengthening writing skills, promoting social media mindfulness, or enhancing college and career readiness, please take a moment to visit our website at journalisticlearning.org. Our team of University of Oregon researchers offer customized AI tools, instructional materials, professional development, and consulting. Research confirms that students with journalistic learning experience outperform their peers on numerous key indicators for college and career readiness. At the heart of our work is empowering learners to become effective communicators. If you think about it, effective communication is critical in every human interaction, whether it's writing an essay for a grade or being interviewed to secure employment. Since 2015, JLI has benefited nearly 20,000 students and served schools in 15 states and the District of Columbia. I invite you to schedule an appointment to explore how JLI can improve your students' learning outcomes. Now back to our program. I think one, so that, this kind of gets to this question of motivation, and
Yep.
it's something I study as a researcher,
Mhm.
and I think, sometimes it has to do with the approach. I mean, for example, another tool that we created is one for schools in Oregon, called SASE, which is a career exploration tool, right?
Mhm.
And so we know that kids come to school with all kinds of interests that often aren't honored.
Yep.
For example, it's
Yep.
quite common for middle school boys to be
Mhm.
interested in video games, and there's lots of high-paying positions,
Mhm.
in that field, but they
Mhm.
have no clue where to start researching that. So the tool that we created basically says, "Hey, I love video games. What do I do with that?" And then through exploration, with and interacting with the tool, it basically tells them, "Oh, here are degree programs. Here are how you might approach this." And I think that's what we're going to see more of.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I guess it's just a little hard to because I think every kid's motivated around something. It's just a question of discovering what that is.
I agree. And I think again, your work with SASE is a fascinating example. Before SASE, I was watching your video where these college and career technical educators, like they don't know, no human knows all the possibilities that are out there.
Right.
And that tool you built helps kids uncover possibilities that their counselor might not have uncovered. The other thing I didn't realize, I don't know if you know this, but if you just take that problem, most kids spend less than 45 minutes in total with a college or career counselor.
Mm.
That's not a lot of time for relationship building, for getting to know a kid, for supporting them with discovery, let alone recognizing that each of us is limited in our knowledge. And so your tool is like using AI to open up new possibilities that make learning more relevant, that help a kid figure out what they might want to do in the world. The second thing I just want to say on the cheating thing, is there's a lot of like talk about how we need to use this as an opportunity to reimagine learning, but what does it actually mean? And if we're very honest with ourselves, like a lot of teachers and a lot of students aren't happy the way our current education system is set up in K-12 or even in higher ed. If we just take, you're a university professor, like there's tons of research that shows lecture-based pedagogy is not the best way to teach. It just isn't, right? Carl Wyman, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, compares a lecture to bloodletting, the European practice, the medieval practice of leeching, right? Um, and I think the thing that I'm really interested in is how might we, again, it's dangerous to be technocentric. What I mean is tech isn't the panacea. It's not going to solve all our problems. But again, how do we put people like yourselves who are thinking differently about teaching and learning in the driver's seat to use the technology to help reimagine education for kids and for teachers?
Mhm. I think another thing to talk about is just how AI is democratizing tutoring. It used to be you'd have to be an affluent kid whose parents could afford to hire
Mhm.
someone to come and sit with you, but now you can engage with this,
Mhm.
and Khan Academy is all over this space. But do you see
Mhm.
more of that happening?
So the
Like,
research is mixed on AI tutors.
okay.
And so, like the dystopian version of that story is that rich kids get a human tutor that's augmented with AI. Poor kids only get this AI tutor. Like that.
Mm,
That's like the dystopian version, in my opinion. If you dig deeper into it, right? So I've tested these tools with like my nephews, with like a lot of young people I work with, and what you tend to see is what some researchers call the Matthew effect, where kids who are already motivated and have certain kind of study habits and cognitive skills are able to take advantage of these AI tutors in a way that less prepared or less motivated or less advantaged kids are not well equipped to take advantage of these AI tutors. And so, like, if you even think about the GPT-4 Omni demo, where Sal Khan and his son were using the latest OpenAI model for tutoring, the model kind of talks about an adjacent side. And if you even if you just talk about that whole flow, a lot of folks that are incredible, like running organizations that do high dosage tutoring, so one-on-one tutoring with low-income young people around the country. There's a lot there that just pedagogically doesn't align with the kind of practices that they have. The reason I say that is I think that again the capabilities are powerful, but we need folks who have a lot of that pedagogical expertise driving how the technology is designed, but then two, how that technology fits in a context where humans and other people are still doing things.
hmm So I've seen you do a demonstration with a room full of educators.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them were apprehensive or fearful, and you
Mm-hmm.
basically you let them into the sandbox and to
Mm-hmm.
play. Talk about that, and that's sort of the eye opening experience it is for people who,
Mhm.
just never have engaged with this before in terms of design.
So I'll take something from a really good. Yeah, and a good friend of mine, Mike Yates, who works for the Teach for America's Reinvention Lab, has he gets people dancing at the start of these workshops. Something that I've borrowed, and it's actually really powerful. Like the reason that's important is a lot of folks don't like are afraid of dancing. They feel uncomfortable about it, and they have inhibitions, right? All kinds of cultural baggage, and sometimes it's just about getting on the dance floor, right? And starting to dance. And we feel that technology is similar, right? We all have baggage, we all have inhibitions, and sometimes it's about getting on the dance floor with other people and learning to play with the technology. And so that's one of the main reasons we call ourselves Play Lab. We want folks playing, right? Starting to tinker with it, building their ideas of what this might be, both what's possible, but also what are the risks, what are the limitations. And we call it a lab because we want to support responsible experimentation. We don't think anyone knows how AI could really be used to advance teaching and learning. We have ideas, we have early signals, and we think that we just need more people both playing to change how they feel about this stuff, build their understandings, their intuitions about the technology, and then experimenting to actually try to find ways in which where does it work, where does it not. And the reason why I think experimentation is important, I'll just take an example. So like text leveling, like changing the reading level of a text is a common use case that people come up with. And if we're honest about it, even if that technology works really well, text leveling isn't always the most responsible thing to do with a piece of text. And so a lot of the part of experimentation involves thinking about when does it make sense to use a tool, when is it in service of learning, and what is it not.
Hmm. Yusuf, you've started a family. Where do you think? Two questions actually. One, would you be apprehensive about your? I know your child's quite young, but second grader, third grader, kind of engaging with AI, and also
Mhm.
what is the world that children are going to inherit? Where are we going to be with this like 10 years from now? You think?
Yeah, again, I don't think we know. I think that the world that I hope to create for my daughter, right, is a world where she can bend the technology, where she can play with it, where she can build her intuitions about how it works. Um, and I hope that more people can have that feeling and those opportunities. And so that's what my work is all about. I think the example I'll give you is like these phones that we have, these iPhones, these Androids. I'll just take the iPhone actually, for example. It's not hackable. It's not tinkerable. If it breaks, it's hard to fix, hard to repair, and it doesn't have to be that way. Like I think it's a choice that we've made to use technology that's hard for us to understand and to mess around with. And I'm hoping to help create a world where folks like my daughter, folks like and had you built software before we started working together?
No.
No.
No, no,
Now,
no.
now you built now
Now
you
I
built
walk up
AI
to people
powered.
and they go, "Oh, you're that guy." I mean, it's like it's funny. It's a whole new
People
point.
recognize you at conferences as a guy who builds incredible AI powered software.
Yeah.
Like you're a builder and you're a creator now, and the world's a better place for that. And
Yeah.
you don't necessarily always need to. I'll give you another example. So we do a lot of work in New York City public schools. Superintendent Alan Chang is one of our biggest partners there. And one thing that he pushed my thinking on is he wanted everyone, every single person, including paraprofessionals, right? So folks who don't have degrees, who are often like kind of teaching assistants and aides, other folks as well, right, in his schools, going through these learning experiences where they use Playlab to build their understanding of AI. And I asked him why. And he's like, look, right, even if someone's not creating a tool or adapting a tool that someone else has built, what I mean by that is, again, there are over 10,000 AI apps on Playlab that are mainly educator created. Anyone can take those apps and remix so they can customize it to their environment. And so he's like, most of my people are not going to create and they're not going to remix. They might be using tools. And even if they're not using tools, he wants them to feel equipped to be at the table, to have conversations about this stuff, to ask questions about how it's being used. And so I think that's the last piece is like by playing and by getting more people into the sandbox, we create a truly more democratic society where folks can ask questions about here's an idea I have, or should we be using this in this context? And so that's the other kind of part of the world that I'm really hoping we can all create together.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. Let people know how to who want to engage, who are listening or watching. How do they access the tools, or How's that?
Yeah, so two recommendations. First, go to the Journalistic Learning Initiative's website, and you got to try Muro and Sassy and these incredible tools that Professor Ed Madison has been building with and for young people and educators. So that's my first recommendation. The second is go to playlab.ai, sign up for our waitlist. We're finally opening up, and welcoming people. One of the things that we do ask though is that before we give access to folks, we invite you to a workshop where we introduce you to the tool and we talk about responsible use of AI. It's something that we believe it's a new technology, and it's important for us to do the hard work to figure out how do we use this stuff in responsible ways. And so again, go to playlab.ai, sign up on the wait list, and go check out the Journalistic Learning Initiative's wonderful work in the space as well.
Great. Thank you so much. The Ed Leader's Edge podcast is produced by the Journalistic Learning Initiative. Please check out our latest books, Language Arts in Action from W.W. Norton Publishing, and Raising Empowered Learners from Rauman and Littlefield. For more information about our work, please visit journalisticlearning.org or edleaderedge.org. Thanks for listening.